That never again means never again for anyone.
My mother died ashamed of what Israel was doing in her name as a Jew to the Palestinians. She'd be turning in her grave at what is being done to the Palestinians who have been totally dehumanized.
Because we're Jews, it's being done in our name. We have to stand up and yell. It's not anti-Semitism to be against Zionism.
Israel doesn't need Palestinians as a workforce, and that is why they're slaughtering tens of thousands of innocent civilians, claiming it to be in the interests of self-defense.
I'm an Israeli. I was born in Israel. I care about Israel. I belong to Israel. I'm attached to Israel. Don't speak about symmetry because there is no symmetry. I would even suggest that there is no conflict. Was there a French-Algerian conflict? There was a brutal French occupation in Algeria, which came to its end. And there is no Israeli-Palestinian conflict. There is a brutal Israeli occupation which must come to its end one way or the other. There is a regime which is today by far one of the most cruel, brutal tyrannies on earth, not less than this, and I know what I say because I covered it for 40 years. And this regime cannot be defined but as an apartheid.
The past 2 weeks I have been called a self-hating Jew. I've been called an October 7th denier. I've been called a lot of different names. It's really important to be here and show solidarity.
Well, sadly, although the Israelis always claim that they had some legitimate target in view when they carry out their acts of aggression, it's very clear that they are trying to prevent the news about what's happening in Gaza, what they are guilty of in Gaza.
You've got to make sure that the blood of the people that Israel has killed is still on their hands 50, 60, 70 years from now. Like, people of the future need to understand what's going on today and the impact level that it's had on humanity.
Okay, so I have to apologise in advance. This video is going to be all over the place because I filmed this like a week ago, actually just over a week ago, and I wanted to get this video up last weekend, but I wanted to make sure I wasn't in breach of YouTube policy and procedure and terms of service, because otherwise my YouTube account would be removed. I think I still might possibly get a strike, but I don't think I'm going to be removed. It would inevitably have been demonetized if I even gave a shit about that. However, the reason it's taken even longer than expected is because I got really ill this week. Turns out I think I became anemic. I've got really, really low iron issues. But anyway, some of this stuff may be slightly out of date. I'm going to try and include clips where I can keep it as in date as possible. But you know, this issue is consistently moving. So even if it's up to date today, it's probably gonna be out of date tomorrow. So with that, I also forgot to mention that I'm going to be linking in my description and in the pinned comment resources for ways you can support the pro-Palestinian movement. Like I say, even just sharing and liking any videos, doesn't have to be mine, anything on like TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, just getting people to know the actual facts is so important. Sorry, this video is a fucking mess. They deserve way better.
Hi guys, so today's a very different video. I'm going to do the best I can to talk about this on a platform that, let's be honest, will probably end up censoring this video or possibly even striking my account for talking about this, but we will see. Hopefully that is not the case. So, I am not the most eloquent person to talk about this. It's kind of one of the reasons why I haven't spoken about it too much on my channel, although I have posted a lot about what is going on in Gaza on my Twitter, Instagram, even on my private Facebook, because people are too misinformed about certain things. I haven't spoken about this on my channel, even though I've desperately wanted to, like I said, for the reason mentioned at the start, as well as the fact I don't think I'm the most eloquent person to talk about this. There are so many creators that do and will still do a better job than I can, but what is happening around Colombia peaceful protest, I literally can't sit back and say nothing anymore, as much as, like I said, I've been really wanting to for the past 6 months. First of all, I wanted to say directly here that I stand in solidarity with every single person who is peacefully protesting to stop the genocide in Gaza.
Responsibility entirely for the decimation, the genocide, the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians lives with the Israeli government and Zionism as a political ideology.
Whether that's the Columbia University.
To discuss the little Gazas that have risen up on campuses across America.
We always knew that Hamas hides in schools. We just didn't realize that it's not only schools in Gaza.
Said you felt that the students protesting were driven by anti-Semitism?
Yes.
Do you feel it's possible they're driven by horror at the slaughter in Gaza?
Or there has been a number of encampments now in the UK as well around our universities.
Hi, I'm Izzy, I'm a student here in Leeds, and we're here to protest against our university's complicity in the genocide in Gaza. We set up an encampment yesterday morning.
I'm incredibly proud of every single person who puts their scholarships, their future at risk for something that shouldn't be at risk, obviously. A number of people have been suspended. Without you, we would not have seen changes with the anti-Vietnam War protests, the South African apartheid as well. You will be, and you have previously been, on the right side of history, and you will be again. I know you will. I've been saying this for 6 months. The scary thing is free speech is in the process in a number of countries, unfortunately, to be being restricted or being taken away completely. In the UK, we've seen that protests are now very limited due to legislation that has been passed due to the Just Oil protests being disruptive. They want to limit the effect the protests have on other people. Protests in general have had to be inconvenient for people so that change will happen. People have had to chain themselves to buildings or to buses. These things have to happen for change to occur. People won't listen otherwise. Unfortunately, it is the case. If our government was better and had listened to people earlier, things wouldn't have gotten this fucking inconvenient. People need to remember that. The reason that people have to go to these lengths is because they're not being heard. There has been thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people who have protested for Palestine over and over and over again. And all of a sudden, now it's inconvenient because people have created an encampment at the Columbia University. The answer to that from the US was to storm those encampments and drag members of that encampment who had no weaponry. Those students, all they had were umbrellas and pieces of the barricade to protect themselves. Many of them were arrested by these police officers.
Both my hair and my neck and slam my head into the ground and hold me there before dragging me through the grass of my oval. Not to mention at one point 3 officers picked me up by my ankles and wrists as an officer explained to trainee officers what a 3-man hold was. We had women's hijabs being forcefully removed, which is all too reminiscent of the humiliation tactics of the IOF, who regularly strip Palestinian women they arrest for no other reason than to humiliate. I won't be humiliated, nor will I allow them to think that they humiliated. I was likewise strip searched by CPD in complete eye line of male officers. And you know what the fucked up thing really is?
Well, if you use language, we will chime in.
As I couldn't care less. If you're upset at my language and not at the actions of your police force, that's what's fucked up.
On the second day, the pro-Israel camp had set itself up opposite these protesters after days of terrorizing them with the cries of screaming babies in the middle of the night so they could get 0 sleep. They took it upon themselves to become the aggressors. They brought sticks to beat protesters with.
Last night, pro-Israel students broke through the peaceful encampment at UCLA and began violently beating the peaceful protesters, all while law enforcement and campus security stood by and watched for hours. They brought stuff like sticks to beat them. They were kicking them. They shot fireworks into the groups of protesters. It literally took hours between the first clashes erupting and police intervening. They piled on top of a person and started kicking and beating him with sticks, which is the picture I just showed you guys. The cops are standing there watching. They have no problem making these unlawful arrests, violating people's constitutional right to protest. And it's so hypocritical how these pro-Israeli people always want to talk about how these pro-Palestinian protests are violent when they're not. From day one, all the violence that has been encouraged and started has been on the side of pro-Israeli.
UCLA, we have clear evidence of counter-protesters violently attacking the encampment with fireworks and chemical agents.
He's aiming that gun right at me. It feels like we're in a war with these cops. There's a bunch of cops up there, by the way. They did absolutely nothing when we were being attacked yesterday.
I just got out of the Palestine encampment. I was protecting the encampment from the Zionists. They tried to take a barricade from us, and when I held on, they pulled me into a circle of them, and they started beating me on the back. They threw a rock at my eye. They threw a hammer at my leg, and they slashed my arm. And then they pepper sprayed me in the eyes.
Agitators, you know, I don't even think it's appropriate to call them counter-protesters anymore because they are not protesting. They come here in a mob-like fashion and violently harass us. They escalated their violence to excessive physical force. They also were throwing bricks at us. They were throwing metal pipes at us. Anytime people would go up and try and hold the line, and they had access to our heads. They were smacking us, punching us. So I also have friends who have marks on the back of their heads and bumps who are severely injured.
Again, the protesters that had no weaponry whatsoever. They threw bricks at them, they sprayed them with pepper spray, and they threw fireworks into the encampment. But not one of those people from the pro-Israel encampment were arrested. The security stood by and watched these aggressors attack these students and did nothing. They stood by and laughed. There has been many eyewitness accounts of this. So they want to take away your right to protest. They are currently, again, writing new bills, new legislation to restrict these kinds of protests.
The House just passed the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, which will shut down college protests against Israel and silence all future criticism of the state of Israel. The law literally redefines anti-Semitism as criticizing the state of Israel and makes it a violation of Title VI to do so. The purpose of this is to allow politicians to pull federal funding from colleges who don't stop these college protests and let their students continue to criticize Israel.
And I wouldn't be surprised if we see that in the UK now that encampments have been popping up across our universities. This started months ago with the TikTok ban, which is in the process of going through. I called this out previously, that the reason that I think, in my opinion, and a lot of other people think this as well, the reason that TikTok is being banned in the US is because they want people to be misinformed.
Some wonder why there was such overwhelming support for us to shut down potentially TikTok or other entities of that nature. If you look at the postings on TikTok and the number of mentions of Palestinians relative to other social media sites, it's overwhelmingly so among TikTok.
They do not want people to be getting these eyewitness accounts. They do not want people to be seeing these firsthand, what people are going through, whether it's in Gaza or if it's at these encampments, at the universities, because they are losing control of us. People will not and cannot believe the lies they are fed from the media.
A massive scandal is developing at the New York Times, where it has now been revealed that the co-author of a discredited article on rape on October 7th, liked genocidal posts on social media, is a former member of an IDF intelligence unit, and had not even worked as a journalist at all prior to taking on a central role in Times coverage. The Times is now investigating the journalist, a woman by the name of Anat Schwartz, but the questions about this incident go so far beyond this one journalist and her appreciation for psychopathic social media posts.
If you're watching this pre-recorded report, then Al Jazeera has been banned in the territory of Israel.
Some anti-Semitic chanting coming from the Palestinian supporters.
Police go home. Does the police force have a particularly high intake of Jewish people? I'd be surprised, considering during BLM we found out that there were really intrinsic links towards the American police force and alt-right nationalists.
Even the LA Times actually said, UCLA cancels classes after counter-protesters violently attack pro-Palestinian camp. You got mainstream media being like, yeah, listen up, big dog, you guys f***ed up a little bit.
Dismantle the pro-Palestine encampment.
Wait, check out the LA Times headline now, much more ambiguous. No. Dude, are you serious? Well, consent is manufactured, everybody, right before your eyes. The LA Times changed their article title again after violent night at UCLA. Another title change from LA Times.
The New York Times is somehow confused about how the violence started. One would have to work real hard to pretend like the media bias against the pro-Palestinian protesters isn't a problem here. It's a huge problem.
I love 2024, where my news has to come from live streams because I cannot trust major media outlets to accurately fucking report on what's going on.
Because we see it with our own eyes. We're not stupid, and we're not going to be gaslit. They're also in the process of passing a new bill, legislation, whatever the fuck it is, to change the definition of anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism, the literal definition, is a hostility or prejudice against Jewish people. They are trying to change that to anything that is anti-Israel.
Do you know how inherently effed up it is to be like, protesting genocide is anti-Semitic, but committing genocide is inherently Jewish? Izzy, what are you doing?
Should this bill become law, it will mean that a group of foreign governments have had a say in developing speech restrictions that govern American citizens.
It's official, the United States is under complete control from a foreign nation. The U.S. House of Representatives have just voted to criminalize criticism of Israel. H.R. 6090, known as the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act.
They don't want anybody to speak out against a country that has, by the ICC's standards, caused numerous war crimes.
So in this picture that Israel released, they have elderly people, staff, and others handcuffed on the ground. I don't know if we remember prior to this, but they said that they were not specifically attacking hospitals. At this point, they're just like, screw it. Let's just show what we're doing. Nobody's going to care anyways.
It appears to be a tragedy, but I can tell you Israel was not involved directly in any way.
When you say not involved directly in any way, what do you mean? I mean, you enabled this convoy, as you said, and your forces are there on the ground and open fire. They said it themselves. What does that mean, not involved in any way?
Hey, are they soldiers?
No.
They're not soldiers.
Civilian.
And what just happened? Just blown up again?
They get blown up.
So those were a group of Palestinians that are returning to their home in a city in Palestine, and they were blown up with a drone. Did that seem like self-defense, or did that look like a war crime?
No, that's a war crime.
You must have seen this picture. This is a clear violation of international law, of the Geneva Convention.
What you just saw was an Israeli occupational soldier who had stolen shoes from a Palestinian household in Gaza in the midst of Israel's ongoing genocide, and who was regifting those shoes to someone he loved in his own life. It's a particularly nasty video that is only one of many reported instances of Israeli soldiers looting in Gaza and really across occupied Palestine.
Netanyahu says it himself that the ICC was created specifically to stop future genocides.
The International Criminal Court in The Hague is contemplating issuing arrest warrants against senior Israeli government and military officials as war criminals. This would be an outrage of historic proportions. International bodies like the ICC arose in the wake of the Holocaust committed against the Jewish people. They were set up to prevent such horrors, to prevent future genocides. Yet now, the International Court is trying to put Israel in the dock.
So if the ICC is looking to charge numerous Israeli military with war crimes, then maybe you've become the thing you hated. Maybe you've become the villain.
If a criminal defendant were to tell a witness or an alleged victim of a case that they're going to retaliate against them if they go to the authorities, that is called witness intimidation.
12 senators just broke international law. According to Zateo, Republican senators threatened the ICC prosecutor over the possible arrest warrants. The letter has been obtained. You can pause to read, but I'm going to read you part of the final paragraphs. It says, finally, neither Izzy nor the United States are members of the ICC and are therefore outside of your organization's supposed jurisdiction. If you issue a warrant for the arrest of Izzy leadership, we will interpret this not only as a threat to Izzy's sovereignty, but the sovereignty of the United States.
The problem I have with a lot of the pro-Israel people is that they solely see it from one side. They were outraged about what happened on October 7th, which they are completely right to, without considering what caused October 7th.
The war in Palestine did not start on the 7th of October 2023, and the subsequent propagandist tirade of the so-called right to self-defense by the State of Israel. We do not condone violence, but a question might be posed. What right of self-defense do you have when you arrive in a place of not your own, take what does not belong to you by force, and any inquiry or resistance to your immoral, illegal, and insane act is met with declaration of death of innocent people?
But what I reject strongly is this narrative, this obsession, as if the entire problem begins and ends with the 7th of October. It did not begin with the 7th of October and did not end with 7th of October. It began 4 decades before that, and it is continuing daily.
And the actions they've taken month after month after month after month after month, bombing hospitals and schools, government buildings, flattening civilian homes, telling the whole of the north of Gaza to evacuate within 24 hours, that people trying to return to their homes, who clearly were civilians, were killed. Even IDF soldiers have turned around and said that it didn't feel real to them, that it felt like they were playing a video game.
First couple of weeks, no one went in, right? So we were just sitting on our asses, essentially looking at screens, essentially the drones going above Gaza. You just go through those channels and you look for those buildings just falling. It feels like Netflix, it feels like a video game for the first couple of days. But there is a moment you realize it's a freaking actual house. It just got completely destroyed. And I don't know, but there probably were some people in there. Maybe there are terrorists, maybe there are not, or Hamas, whatever. But you don't know. And then you start asking yourself, are all of those strikes, airstrikes, necessary?
And it was only after months later it hit them what they'd done. By doing this, the hostages that Hamas have taken, wouldn't it be incredibly difficult or impossible for them to come back alive? Because the way they are treating this, the way they are going about trying to save these hostages, trying to kill Hamas, how can you save people in that way? People who did, Israel asked, and left the north of Gaza and went to the south, went to the refugee camps. The refugee camps were then attacked, and they now only have the border of Rafah as a safe haven, and that is due to be sieged.
We begin this with breaking news now from Rafah. The Israeli army has warned all residents and displaced people to leave the eastern neighborhoods of Rafah. It says they must move to the Al-Mawasi area near the coastline. That's ahead of what it says will be the use of extreme force in the eastern part of the city. More than 1.5 million people have been sheltering in Rafah after the Israeli army forced them out of northern and central Gaza.
This is what Rafah looks like. This has been taking place 4 hours in the middle of the night.
This is Rafah from about 15 minutes ago. They're bombing tent cities.
Egypt might be about to go to war with Israel. Last night, Israel invaded eastern Rafah, and in doing that, they seized control of the Egypt-Gaza border. And because of this, they now control that border up to the Rafah crossing. Now, in doing this, Israel actually violated the Camp David Accords.
Is everyone clear now?
What are they meant to do? The plans were leaked right at the start.
Israeli leaders and officials at the beginning said what they were going to do. They were very clear. They weren't subtle. For example, the defense minister, Yoav Gallant, he said, we're going to cut off all the essentials of life because we're fighting human animals. And multiple Israeli ministers and officials saying they were going to wipe Gaza out and they were going to encourage a mass exodus. From the very beginning, you just had to listen to what Israeli leaders were saying.
This is Gaza in the year 2035, according to Netanyahu and his government, who have revealed a 3-step plan for Gaza for the day after Hamas is defeated. And before I get into the 3-step plan, this is one of the images they used in the presentation.
No Arab, I'm speaking about more than 2 million Arabs. They will not stay there. We, Jews, will be in Gaza.
That sounds like ethnic cleansing.
Netanyahu's never going to let them back in. Maybe, but I'm not sure there's much left of Gaza at this point. And Gaza's waterfront property, it could be very valuable. It's a little bit of an unfortunate situation there, but I think from Israel's perspective, I would do my best to move the people out.
Israel announces the largest West Bank land seizure since 1993. While our attention is on Gaza, as it should be, while the world witnesses the genocide and the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people in Gaza by bombing civilians and starving the population, Israel has reached a conclusion that they can get away with just about anything at this point. Tell me again how this is about the hostages.
We love the Gaza Strip.
We love the Gaza
Strip. Whole strip of land and say Israelis can't live there. That doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make
this
sense.
Is our sovereign
it doesn't make
state.
sense. I'm from New York.
Of course. By the beach? Oh, for sure.
I've said this so many times to people in my day-to-day life, but nothing about this, nothing, was ever the way to revolt what happened on October the 7th. Because when you bomb a hospital full of civilians, full of people on machines that are needed to keep them alive, whether it be babies in the ICU or people who can't breathe without machines, who need medical attention, who can't evacuate in less than 24 hours.
زي ما انتم شايفين اطفال مشبكه على اجهزه تنفس صناعي. طلب منا الان انه احنا نقوم باخلاء المستشفى. اين الى اين اخلاء هؤلاء الاطفال؟ يعني معرفه ما سيحصل انا حقول لكم مبكرا انه نقل هؤلاء الاطفال من هذا المكان يعني الحكم عليهم بالاعدام، سيموتون لانه هذا الجهاز لا يعمل الا بالطاقه وبالاكسجين. إن أردتم قتلنا فاقتلونا وإحنا نقدم الخدمة في هذا المكان، لن نخرج من هذا المكان. سؤال، هل هذا هو الهدف الإسرائيلي؟
You are dooming them to death. Because if a terrorist were to have run in there anyway, if they had seen a terrorist run in there, does not give you the right to bomb a hospital. We wouldn't do that in London. We wouldn't do that anywhere in the UK. So ask yourself why they feel it's appropriate to have done that to a whole country. If you do see videos such as this, if you see videos on TikTok or your Instagram, like them, engage with them, even if it's just putting a couple of words in the comment section, repost it, retweet it, whatever you can do. People need to be informed about what is going on. People need to know that this is abhorrent and it will not be tolerated. It should never be tolerated from any country. And if you feel comfortable, please, if you can, go in person to protests. People need to be heard by their governments. They have to be. We are not helpless, not in our thousands and not in our millions. Stay safe, guys. Something I forgot to say was I hope my community is full of people that are either open-minded to listen to this subject matter, or I'm hoping I've created a community of people who understand and I would hope agree with my point of view on this subject. If you don't, I want to leave you with something that left me in tears today, realizing that we are the bad guy. If we do nothing, if we just keep letting this happen, we are the bad guy. If I couldn't change your minds going through this subject matter, I'm sorry that we probably will be parting ways. But if you're willing to hear this gentleman out, I think you might change your mind.
It's just struck me that most of the things I've believed or been told throughout my life are lies when you apply them to government. Tony Blair lied us into a war, is responsible for, conservatively, 460,000 deaths, maybe as many as 1 million. His punishment for that was to be knighted. Boris Johnson lied to the people, lied to the Queen, lied to Parliament, couldn't tell the truth for any amount of money, apparently, and he got away with it. Rishi Sunak, we stand with you, Israel, we hope you win. Well, the demonstrations all over the West really are indicative of the opposite. We've got American college students, the cream of the American intelligentsia, future leaders, future surgeons, doctors, airline pilots, whatever, being beaten by cops with nightsticks, being plastic cuffed and dragged off the campus. Disgusting. There's never been a greater connect in Europe, or where there are loads of demonstrations, or in the United States, where it appears to right-thinking people that our politicians aren't interested in what we want, they're interested in helping Israel. Netanyahu was on today shooting his mouth off about these horrific anti-Semitic demonstrations in America. They're anti-genocide, you mug. What is wrong with these people? How much longer are the people going to be spoon-fed this shit about the Palestinians being the bad guys? And it's against what America's doing, it's against what our government is doing, supplying arms with every sign of keen enjoyment to an apartheid, genocidal state. Why don't they listen to the people? I actually thought we were the good guys in the West. I can't maintain that anymore. Any pretense of morality that we ever had has gone, sacrificed at the altar of Israel's Zionist, genocidal, murderous campaign. I'm pig sick of it. Wake up. How much longer are the people going to be ignored? Or a better question is this: how much longer are you willing to be ignored?